Hey all! I know it's been quite a while since I've done a deck profile, but I wanted to do one because I've been having so much fun with the new deck I've been playing, which, as you are not surprised here, is Draco Tail. It's been such a fun deck to play. I've really been having a blast with it, going on ladder again and everything. So I want to talk a bit about it and hopefully get some more of your thoughts, as well as help you out if you're first starting at the deck. There's a few different ways to play this deck, and there is not a consensus on what exactly the right way is just yet. But this is the way I've been playing it. You may have a different idea. That's totally fine. Please feel free to leave that in the comments. And your ideas are just as valid as my own, because a good idea can come from anywhere. So first off, shoutouts for this. Shoutouts to the people who really helped me with learning kind of the theory and shaping some ideas on this. So Aaron McInnes made a great video that talked about a similar version of this deck, basically the same in a lot of ways. And then my friends Zach Butler as well as Sin, aka Nogad, who both made great videos on it and have been very patient in talking with me about it. So I'll leave all three of them with links in the description. But big shout outs to them for their brains and for their kindness. Next also is I have these cards physically, which has been amazing. It's been really cool to, play a new deck in paper. So shout outs to all my friends here in Chicago, particularly Rick, Mark, Dylan, Josh, Noah, and Ryder, who all helped me get these cards. So big shout outs to them. And without further ado, with me putting Rahu in its right place, let's get into this deck profile. So to start off with your main Dracotail engine, so something you're going to notice is that every Dracotail monster has an effect to set a Dracotail spell trap from the deck if they're used as fusion material. The spellcasters, so Lucius as well as Femena, do not have an additional effect to their set. However, Malulu is able to negate a monster on the field permanently, as long as that monster is on the field. Pan is able to destroy a monster non-targeting, and Urgila is able to destroy a spell trap non-targeting. Okay, so spellcasters, no additional effect but set. Dragons, set and additional effect. Cool. So to talk about the more specifics of their on-field effects and such, your starters are Lucius, which is basically your deck Stratos. It adds a Dracotail monster. This plus any other monster in your hand is combo, as well as Dracotail Malulu. This plus any other monster in your hand is combo. Now, Lucius is important for a couple of reasons, because one, it is combo. Two, it can be used as a combo piece, fused into. And it's also a spellcaster that can be linked off for Spirit with Eyes of Blue in order to make seals. It's really nice that we have this link one now to just be able to turn decks that don't have as many dragons into random seals powerhouses, which seals is one of the greatest link monsters ever made, second only to Cross Sheep, who is also on this list. So it's really cool to see that. Now, what I think is the most underrated card in this deck is Malulu. Like I said, Malulu has that permanent negation when being used as fusion material, but Malulu's on-field effect is basically the Cartesia of this deck. During the main phase, you can fusion summon a Dracotail using monsters from hand or field, but this does fusion lock you, so just be very aware of that. In a lot of cases, Malulu is kind of this focus of your deck if you see the card. Where you might keep the Malulu on field, and then you fuse on your turn and you fuse on your opponent's turn. That gives you just a lot of great value in strong engine hands. Next, you have Dracotail Femena, which is not the most underrated card because she is the best card in the deck and she's incredible. During the main phase, she's a quick effect polymerization basically for a dragon or spellcaster monster. This effect is crazy and kind of the reason to play the deck. So if you have her plus any other monster, which we play 31 of them, and any other Dracotail in hand, you can make a Dracotail fusion. But because of some of our other targets that are also dragons and spellcasters, you can make a decent variety of things actually in this deck. Next we have Pan and Urgula. So I already mentioned their set effects: destroy, spell trap, destroy a monster to be more specific. Pan has a graveyard effect where if a face-up fusion monster you control is destroyed by card effect, he can put himself to the bottom of the deck, and special summon a non-fusion Draco from your graveyard. This effect doesn't come up that much, but it can be something that can surprise your opponent, so just be aware of it. And second, we have a really important card, which is Urgula. You could potentially play this at 2. I had been bouncing back and forth between 1 and 2. Urgula basically has this graveyard effect where he can target a spellcaster Dracotail in your graveyard, put itself to the bottom of the deck, and it adds that spellcaster back. So a lot of the time you'll be putting your Femena back in hand as an additional disruption kind of hand trap for the next turn. Really great card. Something that you're going to be seeing in a little bit is some people have actually been playing this as a board breaking engine along with one of the spells in the deck, and I'll explain that in a little bit. Next we have your kind of supplemental engine, I would say. These cards are not Dracotail engine necessarily, but they do a lot in helping the deck push into boards, play through hand traps, and all things like that. So Cartesia is kind of the card that you really want to be normal summoning, because Cartesia plus any other monster and a Dracotail in your hand gives you a really nice combo where you can end on both of your Dracotail fusions plus seals and a couple of back row. It's a really great board, and Cartesia's effect to return to your hand during the end phase comes up in this deck a lot because it basically gives you an extra bounce on your Dracotail or Thalion, and it just kind of gives you so much advantage each turn. Also, because like with Malulu, it just says during the main phase, so even if your opponent like imperms this, it's really not like great 1-for-1 value, right? You may be a little bit concerned about the number of normal summons in this deck because technically there are 9 normal summons. However, what you're going to notice when you're playing this deck is that like there are so many ways to fuse that you really don't have this issue come up very often. As well, you side out a few of these normal summons going second. Next, you have King of the Swamp. So Swamp is great in this deck. You know, it can be substituted for fusion material for a monster, but usually you're just using this to grab Poly to make an untargetable Guardian Chimera. This is especially important versus like Yummy because they have a really hard time outing this card besides going to battle phase because it can't be targeted while you have a Poly in your graveyard. But because it's a fusion sub monster, it can also be used for some of the other things they play in the extra deck, like Dragoon and Tyrant, which resets your trap cards, which can come up in some game states. Next, we're playing a pretty decent Shaddoll package here with 5 Shaddoll monsters, 1 Beast, 2 Hedgehog, 2 Squamata. I found that this ratio is likely the best because 1, you see a Shaddoll card 51% of the time, and you only see 2 of them 11% of the time. However, playing these ratios means that as long as you don't see 2 of the same name, they always get their full value basically. So if you're seeing, like I was playing 1 Squamata, 2 Hedgehog, 1 Beast, but what I was finding with that is if I drew like Hedgehog plus Squamata, or I drew Hedgehog plus Beast, or I drew Squamata plus Hedgehog, or Squamata plus Beast, is that there actually wasn't like, they weren't getting their full value. Seeing like Hedgehog will like front load your value as one of my friends put it. But I think these ratios both help with getting your best value for a grand game, as well as the fact that this plus a dark monster and Femena allows you to make Winda on your opponent's turn, which does come up from time to time, as well as they serve kind of the most important function that they have besides making Winda is the cards that they keep in your hand. As you're going to see with cards like Cartesia, it's really important to keep your hand size full for your Femena. There are often times early on when you're playing this deck where you're just not going to have enough cards to really make Femena a crazy disruption. So that's why I started playing this stuff. You might say that these cards don't get advantage on their own, but the thing about it is that there are so many ways to fuse in this deck that it's very rare that they're like just bricks in your hand. So with that, with non-engine, very simply, Ash Blossom, super important in this format. Hit Obedience School, hit Holly Sue when she's attempting to summon from the deck. This is also great in the mirror. Fualos, it's the best non-engine card in Yu-Gi-Oh! And Nibiru is really good in this deck because there's a couple neat interactions. One of them is that even if your opponent negates the Nibiru, it stays in your hand, which can be really important for Femena or for making your fusion monsters and stuff. So you're going to see that hand advantage, as I've mentioned, is really important. So cards, when they don't resolve, that just make you go, that make you lose a card in your hand, can be really detrimental. Additionally, like basically Nib plus Femena and any other Dracotail name, it's basically like having Nib Valor, just with more advantage. Now we go on to the spells and traps. We only play 9 in this deck. So first, the Poly for the King of the Swamp. This really helps you with playing into boards a lot of the times, and sometimes you're playing around hand traps. You have your 3 Rahu Dracotail. So this is basically the deck's branded fusion. It's the one that has the best balance, both going first and second. So it fusion summons a Dracotail using monsters from hand, field, or deck. However, Dracotail monsters always need at least one monster in the hand. So you're never just going to dump 2 things from your deck. So that's the way it makes it like a little bit more fair. Next is the card that's okay going first. It's still engine, but is really good going second. Ketu Dragontail, or Ketu Dracotail, gotta remember that. It adds a Dracotail, then if your opponent controls a monster, you can fusion summon a dragon or spellcaster. Notably, Rahu locks you, Ketu does not. So a lot of times, for example, when you're playing this deck, there are going to be times where like you're playing against something that plays K9 cards, or a mirror match, or you're going to be playing against Vanquish Soul. And you're actually, if you already have engine, you're actually going to hold on to your Ketu a bit to see if your opponent tries to summon a monster, because you're going to get extra value off of this card. It's basically like, you know, being able to just have a Poly in your hand as well as a Rhoda. This card is also seeing some play as a board breaker. So people are playing like 3 Ketu and 1 Urgila, because it allows you to hit back row that's really important, like Yummy Surprise, or the Vanquish Soul Trap, Snow Devil. So it comes up a lot for these things, so you could see this seeing some side deck play. Additionally, we play the 2 traps that are in the deck. We play Dracotail Flame, which targets a face-up spell trap on the field, negates its effects, then it places a Dracotail card from your graveyard of banishment on the bottom of the deck, and you draw a card. Notably, this card and Dracotail Horn, which targets an attack position monster on the field, returns it to hand or extra, and does the same recycle and draw. Both of these can be ashed and can be purged and can be belled. So something really important to know is those cards are not bad against this deck going second, because they're going to keep you from receiving a disruption, as well as giving the opponent a draw or recycling critical resources. So these traps, something to know about them is that they can target your own monsters, and your own spells. So the spell negate stuff doesn't really come up very often on your own cards, but I use Dracotail Horn on my own monsters quite a bit of the time. There will be times where I'll like set up an Arthalion into like a Fualos or something, and then I will bounce back my own. I'll bounce back my own monster, and then like Fualos my opponent myself. This also comes up for things like Evenly, which is seeing a little bit of play in this format, but they're pretty good cards. Typically, when doing siding, I keep in one horn for sealing, and because if it's set off your monster, it can be disruption when playing into a board. But I typically side out Flame because you don't often need it going second, and you really don't want to draw these cards. So they're okay. I think the traps provide a good like resource management for the deck. I think if they were spells or quick play spells, they would be wild. But I think traps keep them just fair enough. All right, y'all, let's move on to the extra deck here. So starting off in our extra deck, we have Blue Eyes Tyrant Dragon. So Tyrant can be made with your King of the Swamp. So importantly in this deck is sometimes you get negated on like your second trap card or things like that. And basically your chain of resetting your traps breaks if that happens. So sometimes Tyrant can be used to reset one of your traps and basically get the engine back rolling into having these disruptions every turn. It's kind of rare that that comes up, and you might want to switch this out for something else, but your mileage may vary. So then we have our Dracotail monsters. So Arthalion and Gulamel both have two effects. Each of them has the same effect in the graveyard. If two or more monsters are sent to the graveyard at the same time, they can special summon themselves, but then they get banished when they leave the field. So with Arthalion and Gulamel, a lot of times like they can trigger off of you fusion summoning, but also if your opponent just like link summons a monster, like if there's like a link 2 monster, then this card can just pop out from the graveyard. So Arthalion's effect is if this card is fusion summoned, you could target monsters on the field and or graveyards up to the number of monsters used from the hand as material and bounce them back. So this is a really versatile card because you can do a lot of interesting stuff with this. Sometimes you bounce your opponent's cards as a disruption. Sometimes you recoup your resources by putting your own cards back in your hand. Sometimes you put this card itself back because you want to still have like Fualos life. It's a really interesting card. So it's kind of what the deck hinges on. You absolutely need to play 3. 3 comes up all the time. Gulamel, when you activate a Dracotail card or effect, you can target one card your opponent controls, destroy it. So Gulamel you can potentially play as a 1-of, but I did find that 2 comes up semi-regularly. So Gulamel is okay. It gets chain block though because it's a when effect. So there are times where like, especially against like Yummy or Vanquishal, where they'll be able to activate an effect that will keep this from triggering. That can be kind of difficult sometimes, so this card isn't as important in those matchups as it is against a whole host of others, but because it gets value basically as long as it's still on the field, it has use for that. If you're in a grind game, this card will be your best friend. So next we have 1 Winda. You can potentially play 2 Winda. It might come up. I haven't had that come up for me yet. As y'all know, this is the floodgate for basically the past 10 years that comes in and out of metas. Notably, something that you should know if you don't remember, it can't be destroyed by card effects. So Caesar Valius doesn't out this, Razen doesn't out this, Snow Devil doesn't out this either. Guardian Chimera is so important with your poly for being able to play into boards. This card is especially powerful against Yummy because Yummy doesn't really have a way to out this before going to battle phase, right? So it's really important for that, basically giving you to turn 3 and to your opponent's battle phase in turn 3 before it can even really be touched. Next we could put Dragoon here as well as a card that you sometimes make off King of the Swamp. This is also something that mostly just comes up against Yummy. I've also made this a couple times against Sky Striker. They have Lemnis Gate now, but it does kind of mess up their materials if they do have to get to Lemnis Gate for outing the Dragoon. It's something that is relatively cuttable though, so if you find something that you may want more than this, by all means. Next we have Mysterion the Dragon Crown. This is a really weird card that came out a few years ago. It requires a spellcaster and a dragon, so very easy to make in this deck. But it has a really interesting effect where if a monster uses Activate effect to special summon itself or a monster with the same original type, you can target one of those special summon monsters, banish it, and all monsters on the field with the same original type. This card is sometimes good into Yummy. It can be kind of weird because they have so many effects that keep them from being targeted by this, but this comes up in a number of rogue matchups, even though banishment isn't the greatest way to out a surge of Malice cards or playing into a Malice board. It is still a good disruption because there are all so many Cyberses, so you kind of wait until they use their effects to special from banish, and then just kind of banish a bunch of the field itself, if you can do so. This card is also crazy against Lunalight. I had a bunch of disruptions and just made this when they summoned from deck with Silverhound. I banished 3 Lunalights and they immediately scooped. Sorry to my old deck. Then we have the Secretarion Dragon. This is a new card from Duelist Advance. This card is really important for the mirror match. It also comes up against Whitewoods and any sort of like dragon decks that are being played, because it says that while you control this fusion summon card, your opponent cannot activate the effects of dragon or spellcaster monsters special summon that they control. More importantly, in a lot of combos, is that you use Secretarion Dragon to reborn a dragon or a spellcaster from your graveyard, because you can target each of these, special summon one, and place the other on the bottom of the deck. So this allows you to make Seals plays a lot of the time. Your Link monsters, Cross Sheep. This comes up once in a while, sometimes going for like OTKs or to get back into your engine at times. Like you'll make this because you have 2 random bodies on the board, and then when you link off for them, you trigger one of these in graveyard, it special summons itself, then you get back into like your Lucius or your Malulu. Seals, very important to this deck. There are a number of lines where you do make seals, but just note that Raku and Malulu do lock you into fusion monsters, so be very careful when you're doing that. You don't want to get DQ'd or warnings or anything like that. SP, because it's SP, it doesn't come up that much in this deck, but it is still an important card that you should have. And Spirit to link off your Lucius or your Cartesia for making seals. And the last part of the deck is going to be the side deck. Remember, this is not gospel or anything like that, so these are just some options that you can play and what I've found from testing, but your mileage may vary as always. So, first off, 3 Lancia. So this is going to come up, of course, because Malice is still in the format, but also has things if people are still going to be on Orcus decks, as well as what is going to be decently popular and gaining a popularity is the Canine Crystron deck. The Canine cards help them play through Lancia a bit, but the Canine or the Crystron engine itself loses a lot of its power into Lancia. Phantasme is so good in this deck because, one, it's a dark dragon monster, which helps you make stuff like Dragoon, Secretarian Dragon, and Mysterion. But it's also a card that if it gets ashed or something or negated, it stays in your hand, which is super important, as we've mentioned. This has good applications into Malice as well as Yummy. A lot of Yummy's disruptions are targeted, so this also keeps you basically alive for a bit. It also is really important for having something that can immediately pressure the Herald of Arclight, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. Perulia, because this is the one of the most important cards in this format because Canine Vanquishal is the best deck. It is crazy, even if it plays a lot of bricks, but it's the big bad ceiling deck of the format, and you need to be prepared for it. In addition to that, we have our 3 going first cards, Called by, Talents, and Skill Drain. I am not entirely sold on these things, but you do need something to side out for your 3 Mulcharmies. This could potentially be something like Shared Ride, as Zach had mentioned to me, or it could be something like Mistaken Arrest, as has been seeing play the last few months, really. Also, with Floodgates, you can play Floodgates pretty simply in this deck because you can just kind of like sit on an Orthalion, sit on a Gulamel, and just play control with those. Now, Imperm is in here because I needed something that does 2 things. One, I needed something that can help you play or disrupt a Canine Vanquish Soul deck, and also keep them from doing things like making a Paradise Smasher when you Mulcharmy them. It doesn't guarantee it because the Lupus prevents targeting, but you can potentially negate the Azuna, things like that. But I also needed something for Herald. When you play against Yummy, the actual Yummy board isn't really a big deal for this deck, if I'm being honest. The biggest issue is, are you starting your turn playing into their board while they have a Herald of Arclight up? If yes, it's really hard to play into that. If they, make the second Herald during their turn or something like that, or they Obedience Schooled and they're making it, in the course of the main phase, that is a little easier to play into. But when you're starting your turn, you want to have a Ketu Dracotail live that's going to get all the value it can. So Herald is a big issue in this format, and I wanted something that helps address all of this. So there's a couple other things I want to talk about. One of the things is that there are a few different builds of this deck. So there's a hand trap build that people like Steven Santoli have been playing. And I think that is absolutely valid as well. I mean, it's Steven Santoli, so yes. But I found that I liked playing this version more, and I was having more success with this version because it has a higher ceiling, allows you to play into boards more, and basically allows you to get the full value out of your cards more often. But I can also see the need to just kind of choke your opponent with hand traps. And things like putting a Veiler back in your hand that isn't once per turn can be very relevant. There's also a branded build of this where they play like a branded fusion and a Albaz. Some of them play branded opening, but to be honest, I wouldn't play that at all because going -1, even with the power of branded fusion, I just don't think it's necessarily worth it. As well as like just getting fusion locked when seals can be really important to this deck. So I found the Shaddolls just to be the most important for like hand size and things like that. But there are other things you can do with this. There is no like defined, definite build that you need to play of this deck. But these are just some ideas and what I found to be the most useful. In terms of siding patterns, something that I think could be rather useful to talk about, I'll present like a few different little siding patterns for you, just so you get an idea of what you're going to want to do. That hand looks crazy. Let's see if Dealing Book is going to allow us to begin siding. Okay, so when you're siding, basically you want to have like, a bit of an order of operations for this. In terms of your normal summons, you often want to keep Malulu, you want to focus on keeping Malulu and Cartesia in before Lucius. Lucius is kind of your worst one going second because Malulu is, both a dragon with a dark attribute to help make Winda and also just plays into boards a little bit better. And Cartesia also, serves a rather similar function. So let's say you're playing against Yummy. What I would do is I take out a Lucius and I would take out a Rahu, because if you have Femena, then you're going to be able to play into that a little bit better. I keep in a lot of this stuff because being able to make Winda or going into Guardian Chimera going second can be really important. So really what I just do is siding into, like, taking out a flame here, because you don't really want flame going second, and just siding into this, and then you're often just like siding out like one Malulu, So before closing the video, I thought it might be helpful to do some side decking ideas. So basically, when you're playing this, as it is right now, this format's very diverse. K9 Vanquishal is easily the best deck, but some of the hangers-on from last format, such as Mitsurugi Raisiel, as well as Malice, are going to be around. But I want to talk a bit about how you might side for some of these matchups. So for example, when you're playing against Yummy, what I would do going first is very simple. In this, you would just take out your Fualoses for these three, right? But if you are playing into them going second, it's a little bit more complicated. So, like I mentioned, the most important and frustrating thing about their board is often going to be the fact that they have that Herald of Arclight up. So, you want cards that are going to be able to stop it or deal with it when you're going to your turn. So you basically always side out of one flame regardless of what you're doing, or regardless of what you're playing against. You don't want Purulia for this matchup. You do want Phantasme because this helps pressure the board, right? And even if they have a Herald up, it'll at least be something that can attempt to go to battle phase, and if they try to surprise you or cookie book, then it's going to be able to attempt to negate that. So to this effect, you want to basically like cut down on some of the things that aren't going to be as important. You want to keep King of the Swamp in because you want to be able to make Guardian Chimera, as well as being able to make Dragoon on your opponent's turn potentially. But you want to side out of Alucius, and you're going to want to side out of these Cartesias. I know it seems weird, but you don't want to really like get into something that isn't going to be super helpful into that Herald of Arclight. So you're going to side out of these. I often side out of one Rahu and then side in the three Imperms. So this gives you a lot more ways to play into this. You don't really want to draw Rahu and start your turn off that way versus the deck because of that Herald. When you're playing against K9 Vanquishal, like I said, this is a really, really tough deck, so you're going to want to be careful a lot of times in what you're doing against it. So going first, same thing, you can do this. I'm going to take out the Fualoses. Something that I see some people doing is keeping in Purulia. I don't love keeping in Purulia in this, but you can potentially do that and take out King of the Swamp and Poly, and just like put in the Purulias, and maybe just like keep in the Poly if you want like a little bit extra. That doesn't play into Droll. But going second, you're going to want the Purulias absolutely because it is so good against this deck. It's probably the best card against the deck. You take out a Flame, a Rahu. You're going to want to take out the Cartesias and one Lucius because you're also going to want to put in the Imperms, and you're going to want the one Talents. So I would often recommend doing something like taking out, where is it? Just taking out like a King of the Swamp or something like that. This deck has, and this build particularly has, a bit of a tough matchup into Mitsurugi Raisiel, but you are going to want to have these in. You're going to want to have the Imperms in for the Duo Drive. You don't necessarily want Talents in because it's not terribly good against them. Usually here, I would just, because they have like negations up on their board and stuff, I would take out King of the Swamp and Poly because you're often not going to be able to make Guardian Chimera anyway because Detonator is going to pop it. So you can take out these, and I would take out a Lucius, and I would take out a Flame. Against Malice, you're often going to want to side into these because you obviously want to see Lancia and you want to see the thing that gets you to Lancia, and as many cards as possible can do that. So side out a Raku, a Flame, and then you're going to want to side out the Kings of the Swamp and the Poly just because they're not as important in this matchup. You can also side out of the Lucius and maybe like a Cartesia if you want. Once again, these things aren't gospel, but they're just some ideas that I've had on how exactly siding patterns may go. If you have other ideas on it, I would love to hear them. I'm not finalized on it. It's just what I've noticed from my testing in how exactly to do the side decking patterns. But it could absolutely change. That's just kind of like a springboard for you to use if you so choose to do so. So that is the deck profile. My eyes just were like, brrr, I wasn't sure where to look for a second. But that is the deck profile. I hope y'all enjoyed that. And maybe if I'm feeling in the spirit of it, I'll keep doing videos because I feel a lot of energy and excitement playing this deck and playing into this format. So with all that being said, thank you so much and have a wonderful day. Bye.